Nora Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nora Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nora Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast, and I am your host, Nora Muhammad. Thank you for joining me for another episode, and the first episode of Women's History Month 2026. And in this episode, I want to talk about a woman, a Black woman in history that we don't hear about very often. Perhaps if we are studying biology or anatomy or medicine, you may have heard about Henrietta Lacks, but she's someone who is somewhat of a hidden figure in American history, especially as it relates to science and the advancement of medicine. And it's a very unfortunate story, as I shared, some stories about what happened to Black women during the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s with the Mississippi appendectomy and what happened to Fannie Lou Hamer and so many others. And medical mistreatment and malpractice wasn't something that ended or that had an expiration date, or unethical behavior wasn't something that was just isolated to a time or a place as it relates to our experiences here in North America. And so this is an unfortunate story of a Black woman who was a wife, a mother, and she was experiencing some pain. She felt a lump in her cervical area, and upon going to the hospital February 1st, 1951, she was unfortunately diagnosed with cervical cancer, and the lump that she felt was, in fact, a tumor. And as it happened, doctors did a biopsy of that tumor. And in doing so, they removed tissue, removed cells, and retained those cells for later study. And what became very remarkable in observation of these cells by scientists right away is that these cells did not die, as cells were very known to do. They would multiply a few times and then die. But in this case, these cells could be kept alive and grown, and they would multiply. And Henrietta Lacks cells became known as immortal cells. And there are some books about this that I will share at the end of this episode. But her cells became known as the immortal cells because the way scientists were able to use and cultivate these cells in their laboratories was just unknown to modern medicine. And even today, we are still, or medicine is still benefiting off of this. And unfortunately, Henrietta passed away that same year. You know, when she went to the hospital, she didn't tell her family exactly what was going on with her because she didn't want them to worry. And so she's being treated, she's having procedures, and her family, they weren't told that these cells were obtained from her. She was not told that these cells were obtained from her. And so, unfortunately, she passed away. And doctors continued to study, to share. Scientists shared these cells with other laboratories. And because of what they were able to do with these incredible cells, these undying cells, they experimented on them and created modern medical miracles, so to speak. The polio vaccine was developed from these cells. The treatment of viruses, the impact of radiation, the advancing in vitro fertilization, cloning, gene mapping, and even with COVID-19. And so, unfortunately, her family, as I mentioned, didn't know, but doctors would continue to go to her family to, get their tissue samples under the misleading idea that They wanted to make sure her family didn't carry those same cells that caused her death. The family did not know for about 20 years that scientists had retained these cells, had used these cells, had shared these cells, had innovated with these cells, had profited from patents that they developed in terms of treatment and medical use of these cells. And so just recently, I believe in 2023 was the first settlement that her family reached with one pharmaceutical company. And just days ago, there was another settlement reached, undisclosed. But, the fact that the family has to, fight for justice, to think about the billions of dollars that pharmaceutical companies earn from, the treatments and medications and vaccines and so much. And this poor family and this poor woman were not able to share in what she contributed to the success and to the advancement of science, not just in North America, but all over the world. These cells were shared. And, to think that, you know, just in 2026, this family is starting to get what, I guess, tiptoes towards justice, because really, what is justice in this case? And how do you quantify that? Who's to say, but I'm glad that now we can talk about our dear sister, Henrietta Lacks. And unfortunately, because doctors wanted to keep her identity a secret, they advanced the name or the pseudonym of Helen Lane and Helen Lakes, right? Because they used initially just the first two initials of her first and last name, right? And so now you can research or go to your search engine and look for HeLa cells, HeLa, HeLa cells. And so doctors, gave the name Helen Lakes or Helen Lane, the idea that these cells that everybody was excited about came from a Caucasian woman, when in fact they came from a poor Black woman who she nor her family knew that this was happening. And so I encourage you to do some research on the immortal cells of Henrietta Lacks, and you'll see yourself how science has advanced, how we, after all of these years, are just learning more and more. And so there's a book written about her in this story, The Immortal Cells of Henrietta Lacks. And I encourage you to go online and do your own research. And I think it's important that we have access to this. I think it's important that I share this with you. There's so much that we don't know in terms of our, not just intellectual contribution, but even our biological contribution to the advancement that the world is benefiting from. And so this is just one woman that I'm sharing with you this History Month, Women's History Month. And I'm going to be coming and sharing stories about other Black women that I think are impactful and Black women that I believe that we should know about. So I want to thank you for joining me for this episode of the podcast. It's always a pleasure and it's a privilege. And I encourage you, please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the like button. Let others know about Nora Speaks podcast and what you can learn and gain and what you can contribute. You can always email me at Nora Speaks. Make sure that you listen wherever great podcasts are streamed, and give your feedback. Let me know what you think about the show. Let me know what you think could help the show. I'm looking for ways to continue to bring great content. This show is not for entertainment. This show is for love. So this show is for information. And I always seek a way to make a meaningful contribution to my community. And this is just one of those ways. So thank you again for tuning in. Thank you for joining me for this episode. Until next time, stay in peace.
We were brought here as a piece of property. And to keep that piece of property, it is to not allow the property to know the value of the property. And what I mean by that, if you had known the history of yourself, you would not have been made a slave. And you won't be a slave now if you have a knowledge of yourself. It's hard to enslave a person that have equal knowledge with you. You just can't do it. And so this knowledge of yourself is the thing that will free you from what you have been suffering from.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Nora Speaks. Look out for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, you can visit my website, noraspeaks.com. Or if you have a listener question, you can email me at nora@noraspeaks.com. Follow Nora Speaks on X, Instagram, and Facebook at Nora Speaks, or you can subscribe to the Nora Speaks YouTube channel. I will be sure to include links in the show notes. If Nora Speaks has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.